The alarm did not sound like an alarm. It sounded like the ship itself was clearing its throat before it screamed. I was halfway through a ration bar when the lights on the Calder station dropped to amber. Around me, 3 different alien crew members stopped moving at the exact same moment, like someone had pulled a plug. A Volant trader named Oss flattened his ear stalks against his skull. A Dravoxy engineer named Finn dropped a tool and did not pick it up. I kept chewing. "Derek," Oss said, voice tight, "why are you not reacting?" "Because it's a docking bay decompression warning, not a hull breach," I said. "Bay 4. Somebody probably forced a seal without waiting for the green light again." Finn stared at me like I had grown a second head. "How do you know this from a tone?" "Because I've heard it 9 times this month." The amber light cut to red. Somewhere down the corridor, a voice that was not human shouted something sharp and panicked in a language my translator didn't catch fast enough. I set my ration bar down, stood up, and walked toward Bay 4 at a pace that made both of them practically vibrate with confusion. "You're not running," Oss said, following anyway. "It's not that kind of alarm." "How do you know what kind of alarm it is?" "Practice." We reached the bay door. Through the reinforced window, I could see a cargo loader pinned under a shifted crate, his lower legs trapped, his breathing mask cracked at the seal. 2 Volant dock workers stood frozen near the control panel, arguing over which lever released the pressure clamp instead of which lever released the crate. I keyed the override, the door hissed open, and I crossed the bay in 11 steps. I did not run. Running on a deck with a partial gravity fault was how you ended up as the second person trapped under a crate. I crouched, found the manual release pin, and pulled it. The crate lifted on its hinge a half-meter. Enough. The loader, a young Dravoxy named Tech, dragged himself free, coughing through the cracked seal of his mask. I pressed my palm against the crack to slow the leak and shouted for the dock workers to bring the kit. They moved like they'd forgotten their own legs existed until I shouted again, sharper this time. Within 4 minutes, Tech had a new mask. His vitals were stable, and the crate was secured. I stood up, wiped my hands on my jumpsuit, and turned to find half the bay staring at me. "What?" I said. Oss approached slowly, like I might still be dangerous. "You walked into an emergency." It was a contained emergency. Running would have meant somebody else got hurt slipping on the deck plating. "You did not raise your voice until the workers failed to move. They needed it." "You are not even breathing hard." I looked down at myself. He was right, but only because I'd done this kind of thing more times than I could count back home, long before any of us had a ship, a station, or alien crewmates who flinched when a human walked too calmly into danger. "I don't understand the question you're trying to ask me," I said. "The question," Finn said, arriving behind Oss with his toolkit still in hand, "is why your species treats catastrophe like a chore." I almost laughed. "It's not a chore. It's just not the end of the world, unless I decide it is." Neither of them answered that. They exchanged a look, the kind of look that meant they were filing something away in a drawer marked human, "We'll examine later." I didn't think much of it. I'd seen that look 100 times since joining this station's mixed crew 8 months ago. Every species had their own threshold for fear, their own volume for panic, and apparently mine sat in a different register than theirs. I went back to finish my ration bar. It had gone cold, which was the only part of the whole event that genuinely annoyed me. 3 days later, I learned that not all my crewmates filed that moment away quietly. I was in the common mess hall when a Volant I didn't recognize sat across from me without asking. She had pale gold markings along her jaw, sharp eyes, and the posture of someone used to being listened to. "You're Derek," she said. "The one from Bay 4. "That's me. I'm Elira. I run cargo logistics on Deck 2. She set down a tablet between us, screen dark. "I want to ask you something, and I want an honest answer, not a polite one." "Go ahead." "Is it true that humans can be calm through almost anything, but there's a point where the calm just stops?" I considered the question longer than she expected, I think, because she leaned back slightly when I didn't answer right away. "Yes," I said finally. "That's true." "What happens at that point?" I don't know how to explain it to someone who hasn't seen it. Try. I thought about Tech's mask cracking, about the crate, about every smaller incident before that one, stacked up over months. None of them had been the point. They were just weather. It's not really anger, I said. It's more like running out of road. You keep driving, keep adjusting, keep absorbing whatever's thrown at you, and then one day, there's no more road left, and you say so. Say so how? You'll know it when you hear it. Alira's jaw tightened, just slightly, in a way I was starting to recognize as the universal alien expression for, "That's not an answer, and I don't like it." "There's a story going around the outer routes," she said, "about a human transport captain near the Calder Reach, some kind of incident with raiders. Nobody who tells it agrees on the details, but everyone agrees on one part. The human said something short, 4 words, and then everything got very quiet, and then everything got very bad for the raiders." "I haven't heard that one." "You're sure?" "I'm sure. But I believe it." She studied me like I was a puzzle with one piece missing, and the missing piece was somehow the only piece that mattered. "Why do you believe it without knowing the details?" "Because I know what it feels like right before I'd say something like that myself. And I've never had a reason to find out what comes after." Elira picked her tablet back up, lit the screen, and didn't look at it. "I hope you never do," she said, and there was something almost gentle in it, buried under all that sharp posture. "For your sake, not for ours." "Why not for yours?" She didn't answer that one either. She just stood, nodded once like she was filing the conversation away in the same drawer Oss and Finn had used, and walked off toward the cargo lifts. I sat there a while longer, turning her words over. "For your sake, not for ours." As if whatever happened on the other side of that line cost the human more than anyone else in the room. I didn't think about it again for almost 2 weeks, which in hindsight was exactly long enough for the universe to start setting things up. It started small, the way these things always do. A supply shortage on Deck 6 that nobody could explain. A docking fee dispute that escalated past where docking fee disputes had any business escalating. A trade envoy from a species I'd never worked with before, the Corvith, arriving on station with a manner that set every hair on the back of my neck on edge before they'd said a single word. I was assigned to liaison duty for their visit, mostly because the station's diplomatic officer was out on medical leave and I was the only one with both the security clearance and the patience to sit through what everyone assumed would be a tedious trade negotiation. Tedious wasn't the word I would have chosen by the end of the first hour. The Corvith delegation leader, a broad-shouldered being named Vask, had a habit of testing people before he negotiated with them. He arrived 20 minutes late without apology. He interrupted Ilira, who was present for the cargo logistics portion, twice in the first 10 minutes, cutting her off mid-sentence both times. He addressed me only when he wanted something, and otherwise spoke as though I were furniture that happened to be useful. I let it go. All of it. Lateness wasn't a crime. Interruptions weren't a crime. Treating me like furniture wasn't pleasant, but it also wasn't my problem to fix in someone else's species during a single meeting. Then Vask said something about Elira's competence, in front of her, in a tone that made the translator render it as a question mark, even though it was structured as a statement, and I watched her spine go rigid in a way I recognized from the mess hall conversation. The posture of someone absorbing something they didn't want to absorb, because the room required it of them. I still let it go. It wasn't my fight, not yet, and Elira was more than capable of handling herself. It was the cargo manifest that finally cracked something open. Vask's delegation had requested priority docking for a shipment that, according to every scan we ran, did not match its declared contents. I flagged it through proper channels, quietly, the way protocol demanded. Vask found out within the hour, which meant someone on station had told him, which was its own problem for another day. He found me in the corridor outside the negotiation room. No Elira this time. No witnesses, as far as he seemed to think. "You flagged my shipment," he said. "Standard procedure for a manifest discrepancy. You flagged it because you don't trust my species. I flagged it because the numbers didn't match. That's all it is." He stepped closer, close enough that the gesture itself was the message, regardless of what came out of his mouth next. "On my world," he said, "small creatures like you learn quickly not to interfere with things they don't understand." I didn't move. I'd been called small by beings twice my size before, and it had never once made me smaller. "I understand manifests," I said. "That's the part of this I'm interfering with. You should be more careful." "I am being careful." Careful is exactly what flagging a discrepancy looks like. Something shifted in his posture, a kind of testing pressure, like he was pushing against a door to see if it was locked. "Careful," he repeated, almost mocking. "Your species talks about careful, while it lectures species who have existed for 10 times as long as yours. I'm not lecturing anyone. I'm doing my job. Your job," he said, "is whatever I decide it is, while my cargo sits on your station." I felt something settle in my chest, not heat exactly, more like a stillness. The kind of stillness that comes right before weather changes, the air going quiet before wind. I recognized it the way you recognize a familiar room in the dark, by shape rather than sight. "Your cargo will clear inspection," I said, "or it won't dock. Those are the only 2 outcomes available to you right now." Vask's mouth curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "And if I decide otherwise?" I looked at him for a long moment. Long enough that whatever he saw in my face made the curl of his mouth falter, just slightly, just enough that I noticed. "You won't," I said. "Not today." He left without another word, which told me more than anything he could have said. I stood alone in the corridor for a moment, feeling that stillness in my chest slowly fade back into its usual shape, and thought about Alira's question from 2 weeks earlier. What happens at that point? I still didn't have an answer, but for the first time I could feel the road getting shorter under my feet, and I didn't like how far I could suddenly see down it. The cargo inspection happened the next morning, and it confirmed what the manifest discrepancy had already suggested. Vask's shipment contained restricted components, the kind used to bypass docking authentication systems, hidden under a layer of declared agricultural goods. Station security took the crates into custody. Vask was summoned to the administrator's office. I wasn't required to attend that meeting, but Ilira found me afterward in the observation deck above the main concourse, where I sometimes went to watch the traffic of ships easing in and out of the station's gravity well. "He's furious," she said, joining me at the rail. "Not at security. At you." "Why me specifically?" "Because you're the one who flagged it before anyone else even looked twice. He thinks you targeted him. I targeted a manifest. He happened to be attached to it. That distinction won't matter to him." She folded her arms, watching a freighter dock 3 berths down. "Vask isn't just a trade delegate, Derek. He's the youngest son of a Corveth war clan. His station here is partly about trade, and partly about proving himself capable of something his older siblings already accomplished. Getting caught smuggling restricted components isn't just an embarrassment. It's a humiliation he can't easily undo. That's not a reason to smuggle restricted components in the first place. No, but it's a reason he might not let this go quietly." I turned that over for a moment. What does not letting it go quietly look like? With his species? Ilira hesitated, which told me the answer wasn't simple. Corveth clans settle humiliation through demonstration. He'll want to prove that the thing which embarrassed him was insignificant. That you were insignificant. It's not really about the cargo anymore. It's about restoring the size of his name in front of people who matter to him. So he's going to do something stupid to feel less small. In Corveth terms, yes, though they wouldn't put it that way. I thought about the corridor, his voice telling me that small creatures should learn not to interfere, and felt that same stillness from before settle briefly in my chest before passing. "I'm not worried about him," I said. "You should be a little worried. Not for your safety, for what happens around you if this escalates." She turned to look at me directly. "I asked you once what happens when a human runs out of road. I think I'm starting to understand that I don't actually want to find out, but I have a feeling I might anyway." "It hasn't gotten anywhere close to that," I said. "He's angry and embarrassed. That's not the same as dangerous. With most species, no. With a Corveth war clan son trying to save face, those 2 things tend to become the same thing very quickly." She left it there, and I let her, because there wasn't anything productive to add. I went back to my quarters that night, turning the conversation over, weighing how much of it was genuine caution and how much was Elira's own anxiety bleeding through her usual sharp composure. I didn't yet understand how right she'd been to worry. The first sign came 2 days later, in the form of a formal complaint filed against me through station administration. Vask claimed I had fabricated the manifest discrepancy as a personal vendetta against his species, a deliberate insult timed to embarrass his delegation in front of trade partners. It was a transparent lie, the kind that wouldn't survive 5 minutes of scrutiny against the actual scan data, and the administrator dismissed it within a day. But the filing wasn't really meant to succeed. It was meant to put my name into a system, to create a paper trail that made me look like the aggressor rather than the person who'd simply done his job. I should have recognized that as the opening move it was. Instead, I treated it as a closed matter and went back to my regular duties, which included a stretch of routine maintenance contracts, supply audits, and the kind of unglamorous work that actually keeps a station running. I didn't think about Vask again for almost a week, and when I did, it was only because Finn mentioned, almost in passing, that the Corvith delegation hadn't left the station yet, despite their trade business having technically concluded. "They're still here?" I asked, looking up from the conduit panel I was repairing in the lower maintenance corridor. "Docked at berth 11, 3 days now, past their scheduled departure." Finn handed me a replacement coupling without being asked, which had become something of a habit between us since the Bay 4 incident. Elira mentioned it to me. She seemed concerned. Did she say why they're staying? No official reason given to the station. Unofficially, dock workers say Vask has been making inquiries about station personnel, schedules, quarters assignments. I set the coupling down slowly. Whose schedules? Finn didn't answer right away, which was answer enough. Mine, I said. That is the assumption, yes. I finished the repair in silence, turning the information over with the same careful attention I'd give to a system fault that hadn't yet revealed its full scope. A delegate humiliated by his own smuggling attempt, lingering past departure, asking about my schedule. None of that pointed toward a productive resolution. I reported it to station security that afternoon, more out of procedural diligence than genuine alarm. The security chief, a clipped and efficient woman named Priya, listened to the full account and frowned in the particular way that meant she was already 3 steps ahead of me in her thinking. "We've had eyes on his delegation since the manifest incident," she said. "Standard practice after a smuggling attempt. I'll increase the watch around your quarters and your usual routes, but I want to be straightforward with you, Derek. We can't hold him on suspicion alone. Inquiring about a station employee's schedule isn't illegal, just concerning. Understood. I'd also recommend you avoid being alone with him under any circumstances, formal or otherwise. If he approaches you, document it and report it immediately. Don't engage beyond what's necessary." I haven't been looking to engage with him at all. I know. That's exactly why I'm telling you this now, before it becomes necessary advice instead of precautionary advice. She held my gaze for a moment longer than the conversation strictly required. "You have a reputation already, you know. Even before this. People talk about how calm you stay under pressure. I want you to understand that calm isn't the same as safe. Don't let his behavior convince you that staying calm means nothing bad can happen." I appreciated the warning, even if I privately thought it was unnecessary. I'd dealt with difficult people before, in difficult circumstances, long before this station or this crew. Vask's wounded pride didn't strike me as anything beyond an irritation that would eventually exhaust itself. I was wrong about that, though the wrongness took its time revealing itself. Over the following week, small things began happening around me, each one minor enough to dismiss individually, but accumulating into a pattern I couldn't ignore once I started paying attention. A maintenance request I'd filed got mysteriously reassigned to a different technician, delaying a repair I'd flagged as urgent. My quarters access code stopped working for an entire morning, requiring an emergency override from station security to get back in. A scheduling conflict appeared on my work calendar that I hadn't created and couldn't trace to any legitimate source. None of it was dramatic. All of it was deniable. And all of it had the unmistakable fingerprint of someone testing boundaries, probing for a reaction, the way a hand might press lightly against a locked door just to feel whether the hinges had any give. I didn't give him the reaction. I filed reports for each incident, kept my responses purely procedural, and continued my work without visible disruption. If Vask was watching for cracks, I made sure he saw none. Illyra noticed anyway. She'd taken to checking in with me more frequently, ostensibly about cargo logistics, though the conversations usually drifted towards something more personal within the first few minutes. "You haven't reacted to any of it," she said one evening, finding me in the mess hall again, this time sliding into the seat across from me without the formality of her first approach weeks earlier. "The access code, the maintenance request, all of it, you've just absorbed it. Reacting is what he wants. I'm not giving it to him. That's a very controlled way to live. It's not difficult, it's just patience. Is there a limit to it?" I thought about that question longer than I expected to. "Yes," I said. "But I don't think about where that limit is until I'm standing right next to it. Thinking about it too early just makes the waiting harder." Illyra studied me with that same careful attention she'd shown weeks before, the look of someone trying to map unfamiliar terrain by feel rather than sight. "I keep hearing that story about the transport captain," she said, "the one near Calder Reach. I looked into it further, actually, found someone who claimed to have witnessed it secondhand. And they said the captain absorbed nearly 2 hours of escalating threats from the raiders before saying anything at all. 2 hours of insults, demands, even a mock execution of one of the captain's crew members staged just to provoke a response. The captain stayed completely silent through all of it, gave no reaction, and then, very quietly, said 4 words, and the entire tone of the situation changed so fast that the person telling me the story still couldn't fully describe what happened next, only that the raiders who survived never approached a human vessel again. I didn't say anything for a while. Outside the viewport behind her, a shuttle eased into its berth, running lights blinking in steady rhythm. 2 hours, I finally said. That's a long road. Is that normal? For your species? It's not abnormal. Some people have shorter roads, some have longer ones. It depends on what they're protecting and how much they've already lost protecting it before. What's your road like? I met her eyes, and for the first time since this conversation began weeks ago, I let myself actually consider the question instead of deflecting it. I don't know yet, I admitted. I haven't needed to find out. She didn't respond right away, and in the quiet that followed, I became aware of just how much had shifted since that first conversation, in this same mess hall. Back then, this had felt like an abstract curiosity, a piece of alien folklore about an alien species she didn't understand. Now it felt like she was watching a fuse burn, slow and patient, towards something she couldn't yet name but had already learned to fear. The next development came 3 days later, and it didn't leave room for ambiguity the way the earlier incidents had. I was reviewing supply logs in the lower maintenance office when Tech, the young Dravoxy loader I'd pulled from under the crate weeks earlier, appeared in the doorway looking pale beneath his mottled skin tone, breathing fast in a way that had nothing to do with physical exertion. "Derek," he said, voice unsteady, "you need to come to berth 11. "What's happened?" "It's Illyra. Vask's people. She's..." He struggled to find words, his translator lagging behind his evident distress. "They have her. In the cargo bay near his ship. Security is already moving, but they said it could take time to clear it legally, something about diplomatic boundaries on his docked vessel." Something in my chest went very still, very quickly, the kind of stillness that doesn't feel calm so much as it feels like the moment right before a held breath finally has to release. "How long has this been happening?" I asked, already moving toward the door. "Maybe 10 minutes. She went to confirm a manifest detail with his crew. She hasn't come back. One of the dock workers saw them pull her into the bay and seal the hatch behind her. I didn't run. Not yet. I walked fast, the same controlled pace I'd used crossing bay 4 months earlier, because panic on a deck with uneven traffic only created new problems, and I needed every advantage I could keep intact. But something in the rhythm of my own footsteps had changed, a tightness threading through each step that hadn't been there in any of the smaller incidents before this one. Tech struggled to keep pace beside me. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. Derek, Vask is dangerous. His own delegation has been afraid of him since the manifest incident. If he's escalated to this, he won't stop because someone asks him politely. I'm not planning on asking him politely. We reached the corridor leading to berth 11, where two station security officers stood near a sealed hatch, weapons holstered but hands resting near them, clearly waiting on clearance that hadn't yet arrived. Priya was there too, speaking rapidly into a comm unit, frustration evident in the set of her shoulders. "Derek," she said, lowering the comm when she saw me, "I need you to stay back. We're working the diplomatic angle to get clearance to breach without triggering an incident that... How long will that take?" "I don't know. Minutes, possibly longer. These things have protocols for a reason, and breaking them wrong could... Illyra doesn't have minutes to spare if he's already decided what he wants to do with her." Priya's expression tightened. "I understand the urgency. I do. But charging in without clearance turns this into an interspecies incident that could... I wasn't listening anymore. Not entirely. I was looking at the sealed hatch, at the faint hum of its locking mechanism, at the small maintenance panel beside it that I recognized from my own repair work weeks earlier, the kind of access point that existed for exactly this sort of situation, regardless of what diplomatic protocol preferred. Something inside me had finally run out of road. It didn't feel like anger, not the way I'd always imagined anger might feel. It felt clearer than that, quieter, like every unnecessary thought had been stripped away, leaving only the shape of what needed to happen next. "Derek," Priya said again, more firmly, sensing the shift in me before I'd said a single word. "Whatever you're thinking, don't." I looked at her, and something in my face must have changed, because she actually took a half step back. "I'm done waiting," I said. The words came out quiet, almost gentle, in a strange way, the way a door closing gently can still mean something has ended completely. Tech went very still beside me. One of the security officer's hands drifted fully onto his weapon, not aimed at me, just present, like he suddenly understood he was standing closer to something volatile than he'd realized a moment ago. I crouched at the maintenance panel, and my hands moved with a steadiness that surprised even me, given what I could feel building beneath that steadiness, contained, but no longer waiting to be released. The maintenance panel released with a soft click, the same sound it made every time I'd serviced it before, ordinary and unremarkable, except now it was the only thing standing between me